Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Robin's Nest. Today we're going to do something a little different. We're going to tell a couple stories and then show a photo that ties in with each one of those stories. Some famous photos, actually. The first one is a story that's been covered a little bit here recently on some different videos on YouTube, but there's been some details that have been left out, so I want to go over that and kind of tie up the loose ends so that's buttoned up. And then the second one is an accident that happened several years ago now. I want to talk about that because it's one of the gnarliest things I think I've ever seen, and it had a happy ending, pretty much. So I want to talk about that. As per usual, if you enjoy our stuff, make sure to like, subscribe, leave a comment, thumbs up, share the works. Now, without further ado, let's get into it. So 2002, we're going to rewind the clock quite a bit here, over 20 years. Petty Enterprises, for those who don't know, it was Richard Petty's team that ran in the NASCAR Winston Cup Series, and then every iteration of the Cup Series after that, they changed the name like 15 times. The Nextel Cup Series, the Sprint Cup Series, all the way up until 2008 when they ended up shutting the team down, where they officially merged with a couple of other teams, but Petty Enterprises, that everyone knew, was gone. So 2002 was kind of a rebuilding year for Petty Enterprises, kind of a soul-searching year. So 2001 was a struggle across the board. They ran three cars. They ran the 43, the 44, the 45. Now, the 43 was the flagship car, and it always had been. That was Richard's car when he was driving. The 44 was Kyle's when Kyle left Sabco in the 90s and came in the late 90s and came over to Petty Enterprises. They had run the 44 prior to that, but it had kind of not been a permanent thing. When Kyle came over, they made it a permanent deal. And then they started the 45 team for Adam. Now, Adam had his accident in 2000. He had made one cup start at Texas. I think he finished last in that race. They ended up blowing a motor and didn't finish the race. In 2001, they were supposed to move that team up to Cup full-time with Adam. Now, when Adam had his accident, Kyle, and I've seen this in an interview where Kyle and his family sat down and they tried to figure out who was going to drive the car. They figured out, they came to the conclusion that it would be best if Kyle drove the car. And so they worked out a deal with Sprint. Sprint was still happy. They stayed on the car for a couple of years. Kyle drove the car for a couple of years. In 2001, though, it was absolutely terrible. You could tell either... obviously, the effects of what happened in 2000 were wearing on the team in 2001, obviously. That, along with the fact of moving the team up from the Busch Series to Cup Series, was quite the undertaking, and they struggled. I mean, they failed to make races, had mechanical failures, engine failures, they had accidents. It was just a dismal season for the 45 bunch. The 44 team didn't do much better. They had Buckshot Jones. He had came over with Georgia Pacific sponsorship. Missed races that he did make. He typically had an accident or mechanical failure. And the 43 car with John Andretti was just hit or miss. They had some really good runs. When they ran good, they had really good runs, such as Bristol when he finished second to Elliott Sadler. And then he ran good at Phoenix and a couple other places, but just very inconsistent. They couldn't get it down on a week-to-week basis for whatever reason. So going into 2002, it was going to be a rebuilding year. They had switched to Dodge. When Dodge came into the sport in 2001, they had been a GM team prior to that. Like I said, running Chevrolets with Adam and running Pontiacs with the Cup stuff. And so it was. I'm quite sure it's quite an undertaking to switch over to Dodge. Kyle said in an interview later on that was probably a move that they shouldn't have made in hindsight because they weren't ready for it. They thought they were, but they weren't. And so, anyways, 2002 started out essentially, well, The 43 picked up right where they left off in 2001. Hit or miss. They'd have some really good runs, and then they'd have a couple of weeks where they ran bad or were in accidents or what have you. The 44 with Buckshot was pretty bad. Again, he had a top 20 run, I think, in Atlanta, and then he was running top 20 in Darlington when he spun out in front of Tony Stewart, who was leading the race, and proceeded to take out half the field and put Tony in the hospital. But Kyle ran astronomically better in 2002 than what he did in 2001. Didn't have a problem making races, qualified for all of them, ran top 20 all season, ended up finishing, I think, 18th in points, which in comparison to where they were in 2001, night and day difference. And then you also take into account that that period in the Cup Series was very deep in the Cup Series. So to finish top 20 was a big deal. And so, but anyways, back to Buckshot, they ended up letting him go about halfway through the season. And so there was a revolving door, essentially, of drivers. Steve Grissom, Jerry Nadeau, Greg Biffle, Christian Fittipaldi. Steve Grissom was actually Petty Enterprises' test driver. And he had stepped in 2000 after Adam's accident and drove the 44 for Petty Enterprises. But he missed races and stuff. And that was another thing, is it's not like Petty Enterprises was running good in 2000 and then just started running poor in 2001 because of the switch to Dodge, because of what happened to Adam and everything. They were already running pretty bad in 2000. I think the Dodge thing was supposed to be a step up in the program, but that just did not happen. So they rolled into Sonoma in 2002. They hired Jerry Nadeau to run that race, what was supposed to be a one-race deal. Jerry spun out, I think on like lap 62, 63, somewhere in that ballpark, spun out. And when he did that, it created a double-edged sword, basically, or a catch-22 scenario. So it played their pit strategy perfectly. It ended up just working out to where, because caution came out, and he could stay out a little bit later on one of the following cautions and get the lead. Well, he restarted second. He had to pass Bill Elliott to get the lead, and he knocked Bill out of the way, which was kind of funny because Jerry used to drive for Bill in the 90s in the 13 car, but knocked Bill out of the way, took the lead. Okay, the spin set that up. And so he's out front. He's got a 10-second lead, give or take. Ricky Rudd took second place. Was starting to catch Jerry, but not by much. And Ricky would say later on in his interview post-race that he wasn't going to catch Jerry. He didn't know Jerry was in that car. He thought Steve was driving it, because when they asked him, he was like, who's driving that car? He thought Steve was, and so what? Anyways, he wasn't going to catch him. Bottom line, Jerry comes over the radio, coming to 2 to go. He's coming through the S's. Starts coming down the hill through the S's, and he comes on the radio and says it's blowing up. And TV didn't know who it was that said that. They thought it was Jerry, but they weren't sure. So he starts going down through the S's, and Ricky at this point is noticeably catching him a lot. And they go through the hairpin, and they start coming back up past Gilligan's Island, down the pit stretch. And then you see Jerry pull off the side of the road, smoke coming out of the back of the car. It blew up, but it didn't blow the motor up. It burned up a rear gear. And that was a direct result of spinning the car out earlier in the race. So, like I said, it created a catch-22 scenario where it put them in a position to win the race, but it also ended up costing them the race. So, Petty Enterprises gave Jerry the car for the rest of the season, what was supposed to be the rest of the season. And he had a couple of decent runs. He ran, I think, 13th at Charlotte, the same race that Jamie Mack won in his second start. And it was a lot of the same stuff, though. It didn't matter who's driving Petty Enterprises cars. If there was an accident, 9 times out of 10, one of those cars is going to be involved with it. It's just how it went back then. It was so frustrating for me because I was a huge Petty fan in that era. And that race at Sonoma where Jerry, broke, coming to 2 to go. I was sitting on my grandmother's couch. I'll never forget. It makes me sick to my stomach to this day. Because that was the closest that Petty Enterprises came to winning another race after Jerry's win, or not Jerry, but John's win at Martinsville in 1999. So they never won another one, and that was the closest they came, and it was just gut-wrenching to watch that. But Jerry was supposed to drive that car for the rest of the season. They rolled into Martinsville, and Steve was back in the car because Jerry had broken some ribs in a go-kart crash. I remember Wally said, when they were doing the rundown and they were talking about Jerry's not in the car because of his ribs, and Wally was like, my gosh, how much did that go-kart race pay? Because you're losing out a lot of money now sitting at home because of a go-kart race when, Cup back then, you make good money now, but back then it was on a completely different level. And then, so Steve ran the car, and then Jerry ran the car, and Christian Fittipaldi absolutely destroyed the car at Phoenix. And then we all know what happened to Jerry in 2003. Had his accident a quarter of the way through the season at Richmond, and he never raced again. So, but that's the loose ends I wanted to tie up. About the spin. They ended up putting him in position to win, which is pretty cool, pretty interesting. That, had that spin never happened, he likely never would have been in the lead or been in a position to win that race to start with. And also, the spin ended up burning John Andretti because John was running up front, I think first or second, and he ended up getting screwed on strategy, essentially, directly due to his teammate's spin. So, just interesting the way that the whole day worked out. But here is a photo, somewhat infamous. I guess infamous here lately, since people have actually started talking about it, of Jerry's car pulled over on the side of the road, come to the start-finish line at Sonoma at 2002, and you can see the smoke coming out of the back of it. Just gut-wrenching to watch, even to this day, 20-plus years later. My God. But here you go. So I got to be honest, when it comes to WRC and rally in particular, I'm very partial to Irish race car drivers. For whatever reason, I liked Craig Breen a lot. And for those who don't know, he was factory Hyundai driver in the Top Flight WRC. He was killed a couple years ago testing for a rally. Drove off the road, hit a fence, and it took his life, unfortunately. But I also pulled for Kris Meeke. And I'll tell you why. Kris was on a couple of episodes of Top Gear. Now, I've watched Top Gear my entire life, ever since I was a kid. It was my go-to show. And loved it. So Kris was on there. I know twice. I know the second time, the one that I remember well, is he had James May in the car with him, and they were rallying I believe a Bentley Continental. It was a pretty funny little skit. So, but Kris came into WRC, I think in 2010, 2011, whenever Mini came back. It may have been 2011. Don't quote me on that. I know it was one of those 2 years, but it was with Mini when he came back, or when he came into WRC to start with. And straight out of the gate, he was fast. I remember when they were shaking down the Mini, they ran in their first year, they ran a couple of rallies just to kind of get their feet up underneath him, and he was fast. Right up there at the pointy end of the. I mean, he was right off the podium, like fourth or fifth, which for a brand new team, brand new manufacturer coming into the sport, that's pretty good. But he also was accident prone, very accident prone. That was kind of what he was known for. Quick, but you never knew if he was actually going to finish a rally or not, because the dude was... And the reason being is because he's on the ragged edge. Okay, and I've got a lot of respect for drivers who are like that. I understand, like, Thierry Neuville's the kind of driver who will baby a car and take it easy when we're going for points, we're going for the championship, what have you. We don't need to take the unnecessary risk. But I also love a driver who will just say, you know what, to hell with that. Let's just go flat out and try to win this rally. And that's I don't know if that was actually his mentality. It's just kind of the vibe that I got from him watching him drive. And so they went to Mexico in 2017, he was driving for Citroen at this point. He left Mini and went to Citroen. And so they went to Mexico, and he was leading. I think he had like a 30-second lead going into the power stage, which is the last stage of the rally. All you had to do is just take it easy. You know, no mistakes. And they showed a clip of all the guys who had already finished that stage watching Kris make his run on TV. Because everyone knows it's Kris Meeke, man. Like, there is a distinct possibility that he's going to wreck this car and throw away the rally on the last stage. And lo and behold, that's just about what he did. He went through a right-hand sweeping corner, cut it a little too tight. There's a little bit of a pothole that he hit with the right front, and it lifted the car up, shot him off the road to the left. And there was a line of trees and shrubbery, and you couldn't really see what was on the other side of that. You could just tell that there was a line of bushes there, and he shot through those, and what was on the other side was a parking lot, which was full of cars, by the way. How he didn't hit someone's car is an absolute miracle. And so then he drives through the parking lot disoriented, trying to figure out how to get back to the stage. Finally figures it out, shoots back through the bushes, gets back on the road, and finishes and ends up winning the rally by the skin of his teeth. And you can see in his interview, and his heart's beating out of his chest. Pretty funny stuff, but here's that. So, but Kris's rally, well, Kris's WRC career came to an end in 2018, for all intents and purposes, at Portugal, when his accident, when his habit to get in accidents kind of caught up with him. He went off the road and hit a tree. And I'm going to tell you what, this is the gnarliest crash I've ever seen in my life, just because of where this tree hit this car. Now, I've seen cars with more damage. You know, we all have. We've all seen cars with more damage. But this tree hit directly above the A-pillar and crushed the roof of the car down on what should have been Kris's and his co-driver's head. But by the grace of God, and that's all you can say, is the grace of God. Maybe luck. I don't know. If you don't believe in God, well, this is just proof. This is proof. I mean, what more proof do you need? Let's put it that way. That he exists, because both of these guys should have been killed, 100%. But they weren't. They survived. They essentially walked away. No problem. Absolutely insane. But this was the end of Kris's rallying career. Citroen dropped him after that, which, I mean, for good reason. I mean, look, the guy keeps having wrecks, and he finally had one that should have killed him, should have killed his co-driver. Okay, let's get him out of the car before that actually happens. Maybe that decision should have been made before Portugal in 2018, and that accident, the accident never would have happened if he wasn't in the car. So, but just absolutely fascinating. Kris has gone on to have a pretty good, post-rally career in rallycross. So it's not all doom and gloom. Everything's worked out for him. But why don't you take a look at this picture? Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it. I appreciate you guys watching. We're going to do some more stuff like this coming up soon. Like I said, we make posts constantly. If you follow me on this channel, we make posts every day. And I want to get into stories like this, but I don't want to make posts where it's essentially a novel where you have to read all day. No one likes to read all day. So this is 2025. We like to watch stuff. So we'll just start doing it in video form from here moving forward. If you guys like this, let me know. If you disagree with anything I said, also let me know. Like, subscribe, leave comments, give a thumbs up, thumbs down, what have you. Share the video, the works. I appreciate you guys watching. It means a lot to me. Love you. See you next time. Peace.
És 100 fölfele. 100 fölfele, jobb 2 tempó, 20-ra bal 2 tempó. 25 a bal 2 tempó, 25-re bal 2 szűk, bal 2 szűk, és bal 2, majd 50-re jobb 2, itt a bal 2, és 50-re jobb 2, majd szűk 50-re jobb 3 az aszfaltra, szűk 50-re jobb 3 az aszfaltra.